Your mind has become a tyrant, and you don't even realize you're living under its dictatorship. Right now, as you hear these words, notice what's happening in your head. That relentless stream of analyzing, comparing, planning, worrying. This mental noise has become so constant, you've mistaken it for consciousness itself. But here's the shocking truth Carl Jung discovered. This isn't natural. You are not supposed to think all the time. Your obsessive thinking isn't intelligence. It's a modern sickness that's cut you off from the deeper wisdom of your psyche, your body, and your soul. In fact, your compulsive thinking is preventing you from accessing the very intelligence that could solve the problems your thinking creates. Jung found that real wisdom doesn't emerge from more analysis. It emerges from the spaces between thoughts, from depths beneath rational consciousness, from the silence your mind desperately tries to fill. If you're ready to overthrow the tyrant in your head, to discover why constant thinking is actually making you less intelligent, and to access Jung's method for reconnecting with the deeper wisdom your mind has been drowning out, then this video will show you how to reclaim your consciousness from the dictator that's been running your life. Consider what's happening in your mind right now. Even as you listen about not thinking, you're thinking about not thinking. Planning how to think less, analyzing whether you think too much, judging your thinking patterns. This is the trap, using thinking to solve the problem of thinking. It's like trying to smooth turbulent water with your hand. The very effort creates more disturbance. Jung saw that modern humans have become addicted to rational consciousness, forgetting that it's only one mode of awareness, and often not the wisest one. The moment you wake up, the thinking begins. Before your eyes fully open, the mental machinery starts churning. What you need to do today, what happened yesterday, what might go wrong, what you should have said. This immediate hijacking of consciousness happens so automatically, you don't even notice you had a choice. There was a moment, however brief, of pure awareness before thought took over. Jung discovered that expanding these moments of non-thinking awareness is key to psychological health and genuine wisdom. The pendulum of the mind alternates between sense and nonsense, not between right and wrong. This insight cuts to the heart of our thinking obsession. We believe constant analysis leads to truth, but Jung discovered it more often leads to sophisticated confusion. The thinking mind creates problems it then tries to solve, generating endless loops that exhaust psychic energy while preventing genuine insight. Real wisdom often appears as nonsense to the rational mind. Dreams, intuitions, bodily sensations, spontaneous knowing that bypasses logical process. The roots of compulsive thinking run deep. Modern education trains us to privilege rational thought above all other forms of knowing. Success gets measured by thinking ability. We're rewarded for mental productivity, punished for daydreaming, spacing out, or simply being. By adulthood, many people have completely identified with their thinking mind, believing, "I think, therefore I am," while forgetting the vast territories of being that exist beyond thought. This identification with thinking creates a peculiar form of suffering. You become trapped in mental loops, analyzing past events that can't be changed, projecting future scenarios that may never occur. The present moment, the only time you actually exist, gets lost in this temporal ping-pong of thought. Jung observed that most psychological suffering comes not from actual circumstances, but from thinking about circumstances. The event happens once, thinking makes it happen 1,000 times. Jung discovered this through his own breakdown after separating from Freud. His rational mind, stretched to breaking, finally collapsed. In that collapse, he encountered what he called the collective unconscious, vast realms of wisdom that thinking can't access. Through techniques like active imagination, he learned to quiet rational mind and allow deeper intelligences to emerge. The visions, insights, and understandings that arose transformed not just his life, but psychology itself. What Jung found in that space beyond thinking shocked him. Instead of emptiness or chaos, he discovered profound order. Not the linear order of rational thought, but the organic order of psychic life. Images arose that contained more meaning than thousands of words. Emotions revealed truths that logic couldn't touch. Body sensations guided him more accurately than mental analysis. He realized that thinking, for all its usefulness, had been blocking access to these deeper forms of intelligence. Your vision will become clear only when you can look into your own heart. Who looks outside, dreams. Who looks inside, awakes. But looking inside requires stopping the constant mental chatter that prevents inner seeing. Thinking creates a screen of concepts, analyses, and judgments that obscures direct perception. You think about your feelings instead of feeling them. You analyze your intuitions instead of following them. You conceptualize your experiences instead of living them. All this thinking creates distance from immediate reality. The shadow relationship with thinking deserves examination. What aspects of yourself have you rejected in favor of being rational? Perhaps you've disowned your intuitive knowing, judging it as unreliable. Maybe you've rejected emotional intelligence, seeing it as weakness. Possibly you've suppressed body wisdom, trusting thoughts over sensations. These rejected ways of knowing don't disappear. They operate unconsciously, often in opposition to conscious thinking, creating the very irrationality you tried to avoid. Consider how often your best insights come when you're not thinking, in the shower, during a walk, just before sleep. These moments of mental relaxation allow other forms of intelligence to surface. Jung called this the transcendent function. The psyche's ability to unite conscious and unconscious material into new understanding. But this function requires space, silence, a pause in thinking's constant commentary. When you fill every moment with thoughts, you block this natural integrative process. Jung's concept of psychological types illuminates why some people suffer more from overthinking. If thinking is your dominant function, you'll naturally process everything through rational analysis. But this becomes problematic when thinking dominates exclusively, suppressing feeling, intuition, and sensation. The goal isn't to stop thinking entirely, but to develop a balanced psyche where thinking serves rather than rules. The thinking type's shadow often contains rich emotional life, bodily awareness, and intuitive wisdom, all sacrificed for rational clarity. These individuals might excel at analysis but struggle with relationships, miss body signals until illness forces attention, or dismiss intuitive warnings that later prove accurate. Jung emphasized that individuation requires developing all functions, not perfecting one at the expense of others. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. Constant thinking is often in defense against the unconscious. As long as you keep the rational mind busy, you don't have to face deeper truths, feelings, or knowings that might disturb ego's control. The compulsive thinker resembles someone talking loudly to avoid hearing an important message. The very intensity of thinking reveals anxiety about what might emerge in silence. This defensive quality of overthinking becomes clear in insomnia. Night after night, thoughts race, preventing sleep. But what is being avoided? Often it's the vulnerability of letting go, the little death of ego dissolution that sleep requires. The thinking mind fights to maintain control even when exhaustion demands surrender. Jung saw this as resistance to the unconscious, which speaks most clearly when rational defenses relax. Dreams demonstrate intelligence beyond thinking. Every night, your psyche creates complex narratives full of wisdom that rational mind could never construct. Dreams solve problems, reveal truths, provide guidance, all without conscious thinking's involvement. Jung spent decades demonstrating that dreams aren't random, but meaningful communications from aspects of psyche wiser than rational consciousness. Yet most people dismiss dreams because they don't fit thinking's logic. The dream world operates on different principles: condensation, displacement, symbolic representation. A single dream image might contain layers of meaning that would take hours to think through. yet the psyche grasps it instantly. This is the intelligence you access when thinking quiets. It's not primitive or inferior to rational thought. It's more comprehensive, able to hold paradox and complexity that linear thinking must reduce to manage. The body holds intelligence that thinking obscures. Your gut feelings, heart knowing, and somatic responses provide information more accurate than mental analysis. But constant thinking overrides these signals. You think your way out of bodily wisdom, creating elaborate justifications for ignoring what your organism knows. Jung understood that psyche includes body, that wisdom speaks through sensation as clearly as through thoughts. Modern life systematically trains us to ignore body intelligence. Sit still when your body wants to move. Stay awake when tired. Eat by clock rather than hunger. Work through illness. Push through pain. All reinforced by thinking that explains why body signals should be overridden. Jung saw this split between mind and body as pathological, creating not just physical illness, but psychological fragmentation. I am not what happened to me. I am what I choose to become. But becoming requires more than thinking about who you want to be. It requires accessing creative forces that emerge from non-rational depths. The self, Jung's term for the archetype of wholeness, communicates through symbols, synchronicities, dreams, and intuitions more than through logical thoughts. Constant thinking blocks these communications, like static interfering with a subtle signal. The process of individuation, becoming who you truly are, can't be thought into existence. You can't analyze your way to wholeness. The self reveals itself through lived experience, creative expression, relationship dynamics, and encounters with the numinous. These experiences must be undergone, not understood. Thinking about swimming teaches nothing about water. Only immersion brings real knowledge. The practice Jung developed starts with recognizing thinking's autonomous quality. Thoughts think themselves. You don't choose most of your thoughts. They arise automatically, triggered by associations, complexes, and habitual patterns. Realizing you're not your thoughts, but the awareness that observes them, creates space for disidentification. You can watch thoughts without being possessed by them. This recognition can be profoundly liberating. If thoughts simply arise like weather patterns in the mind, you're not responsible for their content, only for how you relate to them. The anxious thoughts, the critical voices, the obsessive loops. None of these define you. They're mental events passing through awareness. Jung found that this shift in perspective alone could break thinking's tyranny. Active imagination offers an alternative to thinking. Instead of analyzing a problem, Jung would enter imaginative dialogue with it. Visualize your issue as a figure and converse without predetermined agenda. Let unexpected responses arise. This isn't thinking about the problem, but allowing the problem to reveal itself through image and dialogue. Solutions emerge that thinking could never reach because they come from beyond rational consciousness. For example, someone struggling with creative block might visualize their creativity as a figure and ask why it's hiding. The figure might reveal fears thinking couldn't access, fear of judgment, of success, of revealing too much. Through dialogue rather than analysis, new relationship becomes possible. The block transforms from problem to teacher, revealing not just obstacles, but the growth trying to happen. Show me a sane man and I will cure him for you. Our culture's sanity includes constant mental productivity, perpetual analysis, and rational explanation for everything. Jung's cure involves discovering kinds of knowing our sanity excludes. The knowledge that comes through symbol rather than concept. The understanding that arises from silence rather than words. The wisdom accessible through being rather than thinking. This cultural insanity of constant thinking creates what Jung saw as collective neurosis. Everyone anxiously thinking, planning, analyzing, creating a society of exhausted minds, producing solutions to problems created by too much thinking. The cure isn't more or better thinking, but the courage to stop, to allow other forms of intelligence to emerge, to trust that consciousness includes more than rational thought. Synchronicities increase when thinking quiets. These meaningful coincidences can't be grasped by rational analysis. They must be experienced directly. When you stop thinking about what everything means and start noticing what's actually happening, patterns emerge that thinking would miss or dismiss. Life begins communicating through events rather than thoughts, showing rather than telling. Jung documented countless synchronicities in his practice. The patient who dreams of a golden scarab just as one taps at the window. The person who thinks of an old friend moments before they call. The book that falls open to exactly the needed passage. These aren't supernatural events, but natural consequences of psyche and world being more connected than thinking recognizes. When mental noise quiets, these connections become visible. The religious attitude Jung advocated doesn't require belief, but does require releasing thinking's monopoly. Sacred experience comes through presence, not analysis. Mystery reveals itself to quiet minds, not busy ones. The numinous, that quality of awe and wonder, can't be thought into existence. It appears when thinking steps aside, allowing direct encounter with life's depths. Many people have abandoned religious or spiritual life because thinking found it irrational, but Jung discovered that psyche has genuine religious needs that thinking can neither meet nor dismiss. The need for meaning beyond personal ego, for connection to something greater, for experiences of awe, wonder, transcendence. When thinking blocks these experiences, psyche suffers what Jung called spiritual starvation, a malnutrition of meaning that no amount of rational achievement can cure. Nature provides perfect training for non-thinking awareness. Trees don't require analysis. Sunset needs no interpretation. Ocean communicates without words. In nature, thinking reveals itself as peculiar human activity that often interferes with deeper communion. Jung regularly retreated to his Ballingen Tower, finding in stone and lake the silence that restored balance to his psyche. In nature, the immediacy of sensory experience overwhelms thinking's commentary. The feel of wind, sound of water, smell of earth, these arrive faster than thoughts about them. Jung found that regular nature immersion naturally quiets mental chatter, allowing what he called participation mystique, direct communion with life that thinking interrupts but can never improve. Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. Notice who you judge as not thinking enough or thinking too much. These judgments reveal your own relationship with thinking. The person you see as stupidly impulsive might carry your rejected spontaneity. The one you view as overthinking everything might mirror your own mental tyranny. These projections show where your thinking creates imbalance. The creative process demonstrates intelligence beyond thinking. True creativity doesn't come from figuring things out, but from allowing emergence. The painter doesn't think the painting into existence. The musician doesn't analyze music into being. The writer discovers what they're writing through writing, not through planning. Jung found that creativity requires suspending rational control, allowing unconscious forces to move through conscious expression. Every creative person knows the experience. Hours of thinking produce nothing. Then, in a moment of mental relaxation, the solution appears whole. Jung saw this as the psyche's natural creative function, always available but usually blocked by thinking's noise. The muse speaks in the gaps between thoughts. In the silence, thinking abhors. Physical symptoms often reflect thinking imbalances, headaches from mental strain, insomnia from racing thoughts, digestive issues from analyzing rather than digesting life, chronic fatigue from mental hypervigilance. The body protests when thinking dominates, creating symptoms that force attention to neglected dimensions of being. Jung saw these not as problems to think through, but as communications requiring different kinds of attention. The epidemic of anxiety in our culture directly relates to overthinking. Anxiety is often thinking projected into the future, creating scenarios of what might go wrong. Depression frequently involves thinking trapped in the past, replaying what went wrong. Both conditions improve when thinking quiets enough for present moment awareness to emerge. Jung understood that most psychological symptoms serve to break thinking's monopoly, forcing attention to neglected aspects of psyche. Relationships suffer when thinking dominates. You analyze your partner instead of experiencing them. You think about love instead of feeling it. You strategize interactions instead of allowing authentic connection. The thinking mind creates distance even in intimacy, turning lived relationship into conceptual exercise. Jung found that real meeting happens when thinking quiets enough for genuine presence. The practice of not thinking isn't about becoming mindless, but about developing what Jung called symbolic thinking, a way of knowing that includes but transcends rational analysis. Symbols speak to totality of psyche, engaging feeling, intuition, and sensation alongside thinking. A dream symbol carries meaning that pages of analysis can't exhaust. And synchronistic event communicates truth that logic can't contain. Time changes when thinking quiets. Clock time, thinking's time, moves linearly, always running out. But psyche knows kairos time, the right moment, the pregnant now, the eternal present accessible when mental chatter ceases. In this deeper time, solutions arise without effort. Healing happens without strategy. Transformation occurs without plan. Jung discovered that psyche has its own timing, that thinking disrupts but can't improve. The fear beneath compulsive thinking deserves compassion. Often, we think constantly because silence feels threatening. What might we discover if we stop distracting ourselves with mental noise? What feelings await in the quiet? What truths lurk in the spaces between thoughts? The thinking mind maintains its tyranny through fear of what lies beyond its borders. Jung's method involves gradual disidentification with thinking rather than violent suppression. Notice thoughts arising, name them, planning, worrying, analyzing. Return attention to present sensation, breath, body, immediate environment. This isn't concentration exercise, but practice in recognizing alternatives to thinking. Slowly, spaces appear between thoughts. In these gaps, other intelligences speak. The inferior function, whatever psychological function remains most unconscious, often provides escape from thinking's tyranny. For thinking types, this might be feeling or sensation. Deliberately engaging inferior functions feels uncomfortable, but breaks thinking's monopoly. Dance if you usually analyze, paint if you typically plan, feel if you habitually think. These activities bypass rational mind, accessing neglected wisdom. Dreams reward attention to non-thinking intelligence. Keep a dream journal not to analyze, but to honor. Let dream images live in awareness without interpretation. Carry dream feelings through the day without explaining them. This practice teaches respect for intelligence that communicates through image and emotion rather than concept and logic. The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. But you can't think your way to authenticity. The true self emerges through lived experience, bodily knowing, emotional truth, intuitive leaps, all the ways of being that constant thinking obscures. Becoming requires risking the unknown, stepping beyond thinking's familiar territory into mystery. The collective pressure to think constantly deserves recognition. In our information age, not having opinions seems like ignorance. Not analyzing appears naive. Not planning looks irresponsible. But Jung saw that wisdom often comes through not knowing, through maintaining what Zen calls beginner's mind. The pressure to always think prevents access to deeper knowing. The transformation that comes from quieting compulsive thinking can't be predicted because prediction requires thinking. What emerges is often surprising, capacities you didn't know you had, wisdom you couldn't have figured out, solutions that seem to arise from nowhere. This isn't magic, but natural consequence of accessing intelligence broader than rational mind. Jung's promise isn't that you'll stop thinking entirely. thinking has its place and value. Rather, you'll discover that thinking is tool, not master. You'll access intelligences that complement and often surpass rational analysis. You'll find that many problems dissolve when you stop thinking about them, that wisdom emerges from silence, that being is often wiser than thinking. Your constant thinking has been a defense against life's mystery, an attempt to control through analysis what can only be lived through experience. The invitation is to lay down this defense, to risk not knowing, to discover what emerges when mental noise quiets. Not permanently, thinking will return when needed, but no longer as tyrant, rather as servant of a psyche, vast enough to include all ways of knowing. In the spaces between thoughts lies freedom. In the silence beneath mental chatter lives wisdom. In the not thinking dwells the intelligence that created thinking, but isn't limited to it. Jung showed us that accessing this deeper intelligence isn't about trying harder, but about letting go. Stop thinking you need to think all the time. Just stop. And in that stopping, discover what you've been missing while your mind was making all that noise. The direct, immediate, living wisdom of your whole being, speaking in languages older and wiser than thought. And if you want to dive even deeper into Jung's psychology, click the recommended video on your screen now.